I want to thank everybody coming to the Claymont City Board of Education regular meeting today on March the 9th. It's 5:30, so we're going to go ahead and get started. Can we have roll call?
Mr. Cottrell,
Here.
Mrs. Grandison,
Here.
Mrs. Host, Mr. Miles,
Here.
and Mrs. Wolf.
Yes. Here. Okay, can we stand for the pledge of allegiance?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic.
Okay, we're going to start out with accommodations from Mr. Lynch.
On your board agenda, you'll see Buckeye Career Center students. Recently, we had the students compete and qualify for the BPA state qualifiers. I want to highlight Robert Fellows and device configuration and troubleshooting and network administration using Cisco Xavier Pittman. So, and all the other students through Buckeye who were very successful in moving on to state qualifiers. I'd also like to, considering Buckeye, I went last Thursday. I asked Ms. Kahn and Mr. Watkins to go with me and to present during their career carnival. This is the second year in a row we've had a chance to go up there and present to kids on education and the jobs in education. So we present what you have to have a high school diploma for to a bachelor's, master's degree. I heard more than once, and actually Tuesday night at the gym during workout, one girl is rowing and turned to me and said, "Hey, I just want to let you know I was presenting up at Buckeye and your kids are phenomenal." And the assistant principal also relayed that message about our kids, and the kids, not just our 8th graders, but also our juniors and seniors that attend up there. So I want to commend our kids that attend Buckeye and also our 8th graders. And I don't know if the teachers that went said, "You better behave or else," but it was duly recognized. Also, the esports coaches and team presented down in Columbus recently. So I want to commend them for presenting on esports. And our kids and coaches are kind of like they've set the roadmap for esports. So I want to commend them on that also. The 21st of February, we had a professional development day, and as part of the presenters gifts, Carmel Company, as Bethany Doan's parents, and she's a 1st grade teacher at over at the elementary. Her parents donated a little treat bag for all the people who presented. So I want to thank Carmel Company for that. I also have, not on your agenda, I want to commend our competition cheer team for getting 3rd in the state. So they did a phenomenal job. I think they practice almost every day of the week. So 3rd in the state is a very big deal. And also, I want to commend Mrs. Marsh and the intermediate staff for a successful reunification drill last Friday. It was well planned out, and the scenario was an appropriate scenario where there was a train derailment, and we had to evacuate due to our water was contaminated and reunify. So each building, I just want to say, each building though has a scheduled time this spring to do reunification drill also. And I know a couple other of you have had some accommodations as well.
I did. I want to congratulate the cheerleaders as well, who placed 3rd in the state, and then also shout out to Bailey Edelman for getting player of the year for District 5, 3, and also scoring 1,000+ points in her high school career. Also, I want to congratulate and wish our 3 state qualifier wrestlers, Elijah Parrish, Faye Mahaffey, and Wyatt Shaw. I believe they're leaving here tonight at 6 o'clock to head to Columbus. Also congratulate our Biddy youth program. We had 3 qualifiers and placers, Briar Green, Troy Miles, and Jason Miles. And then that's all that I had that I'm sitting on the athletic council that I wanted to hit. And And Mr. Watkins sent out the Saxton Giametti, 8th grader. Won the spelling bee at the school, and then was runner up at the regional, and then an alternate in national in the BC area. That was pretty cool. Thanks for sharing.
Does anybody else have any accommodations?
I had a couple. I just wanted, again, Mr. Watkins, your email, the 11 Claymont Mustangs who competed in the Math Counts chapter. So I thought that was really awesome. So thank you for sharing that. And then the only other thing I had in regards to Buckeye was Lauren Ferguson, who received her National Healthcare Association technician certification. So I wanted to make sure that we shared that as well. So and then also Mr. Wrench and Ms. Khan and Mr. Watkins made the Buckeye Career Center newsletter. So I took a little snippet and I sent it to Mr. Watkins or to Mr. Wrench, and I'm like, hey, you're like Claymont, like, you know, famous. So I just want to thank you guys for doing that. I appreciate that. Obviously only that all the positive feedback that we can get for Claymont, I truly appreciate. So I appreciate you guys taking the time from your schedules and going there and speaking. And I also heard positive feedback about that. So thank you. I just want to thank you for that.
I have one accommodation, or I just want to say thank you to the middle school student council. The student council advisors from the middle school brought their I think there was probably about 15 of them, or maybe even more, down to the food pantry. And I gave them a tour of the food pantry, and they did a wonderful job. They worked and made my life very easy that week. They did a very nice job. We're very well behaved. They had to walk to and from, and was fortunate. It was a nice day that day, but I want to say, and they were very well behaved. So I appreciate that. Is there any other accommodation?
I think one more thing that we need to say is congratulations to Richard Page on his retirement and the 41 years that he put into the district.
Yeah.
I don't know if he's here, is he? I
Richard,
don't think he's here, but
No,
will you pass that on to him? Thank you.
Richard is just finished tutoring and is now getting kids loaded on cars. So he said he'd try to get over here after that, but tutoring was tonight at the elementary.
Okay, there's no more. We're going to go into executive session. And we're going to go in with action to follow. And we're going under employment only.
So I make a motion, we go into executive session. 5:33.
Steve second.
Steve seconded. So we got Mr. Cottrell, or let's go, Mrs. Host.
Yes.
Mr. Miles,
Yes.
Mr. Cottrell,
Yes.
Mrs. Grandison.
Yes.
And Mrs. Wolf.
Yes. Oh, yeah.
6:18.
And then public.
We're going to do public participation. Do I?
Just reminding you, so I'm 5 minutes. 30, and then say the name and address.
I assumed, I was like, I don't know.
Nathan. There's a big paragraph here on board participation. I'm going to skim over it. He needs to have his name and address on the big thing is you've got to put your name and address on paper, and it can't be excessive a long time. Everybody has the paragraph.
3 minutes. Make it work.
Somebody started timing. Okay.
So I apologize for not reading that, but I'm not.
No, that's
Thank
fine.
you.
So first of all, I want to thank you guys for allowing me to speak this evening. I had emailed Mr. Wrench earlier this week and just kind of felt compelled to speak after we were talking at our building about, and you guys kind of mentioned it, you kind of stole my thunder in the commendations. But Saxon Giametti being one of our 8th graders as an alternate for the spelling bee, the regionals. And there were some people in our building that when the topic was brought up, we were like, we had no idea, and that's a huge thing for not only, one of our kids, but for the area. I mean, that's a national spelling bee. So I just kind of felt compelled to talk tonight about, as both a staff member in this district, but also as a community member. I live in Uriksville. I chose to move to this district. I did not live here when I started, but I wanted to kind of maintain my career here. I've had offers to go elsewhere, and I choose to stay here because I love this district. And I feel like over the last 2 to 3 years, we've really made a lot of positive progress as a district. And I know as a teacher, as a paraprofessional, as an administrator, as a board member, support staff, we all kind of get bogged down on the daily with the negativity and the stresses of the job, because there are a lot. But I think we need to take a moment to kind of celebrate a lot of the positives and the successes that we've had as a district. And this is why I said you kind of stole my thunder with the commendations. But I mean, you look at even currently, I mean, we could go back the last 2 to 3 years, even longer, at a lot of the significant achievements we've had as a district. But you look at Saxon Giametti being in the regional spelling bee as second place as the alternate in spelling bee. You look at, we have 3 wrestlers that are leaving, I believe, right now to head to Columbus to be state qualifiers. We have I'm going to kind of humble brag on a colleague of mine, Mrs. Jill Wagner recently received an Outstanding Educator Award. And it's not only athletics and extracurriculars, but it's also academics, because we all hear, unfortunately, working in this district of how others outside of this community sometimes look down on us. And I think sometimes it's our job, and I think we do a great job at this through the Mustang Pride Media and just our own Facebook page, and just teachers and staff themselves speaking out and highlighting the positives that we have. And I would love to see that continue. And like I said, it's not only the extracurriculars and the athletics, it's the academics. You look at our state report card, which has changed, over the last couple of years, it looks very different. There's no longer letter grades, but I mean, the successes we've made with the children that we have in this district, in not only achievement, in not only progress, but in gap closing. We have teachers that are here tonight. We have teachers that are not here tonight, that have made great strides with the students that we have. And when you look at where our students start with us at the beginning of the year and the progress that we make by the end of that year, by the time they transition to the next building and by the time they graduate, we have always been able to grow kids. And I will say that, as long as I can. And that is one of the reasons why I choose to stay in this district. So like I said, I felt compelled this evening to speak on some of those positives, because I think a lot of the times we get so kind of tunnel vision on the stresses and the day-to-day and everything else we have going on. And we don't take time sometimes to celebrate those successes. So I think we've done a great job over the last 2 to 3 years of making a lot of positive progress, both between administration and teachers. I would love to see that continue, and I think it will. And I would also like us to kind of all take a moment every now and then to pause and celebrate our successes. That's it.
Well,
Thank you.
Thank you.
Very well said, Nate. Thank you.
I'll comment to that though, but just in Nathan, your comments in there, our district leadership team meets three times a year. And the amount of progress that we've made as a district leadership team has been phenomenal. And that has now trickled down to our buildings. And I'm just echoing what you said. We've made a tremendous amount of progress as a district in the academics, because that's the primary focus there. But we do work well as a team at our district leadership team meetings. So I just want to thank you for those comments.
Thank you.
I'll echo that. I appreciate that. I have said over and over again, I would put Claymont's teachers up against anybody's. Both of my kids got an excellent education. Catherine ended up with a full academic scholarship to Capital. So kudos to our entire team from elementary all the way to the high school. I think our teachers are second to no one. We have, I feel like we have the best at Claymont. So.
Okay, we'll go into administrative reports. We have received quite a few here via email. But I'll go ahead. Does anybody want to add to Mr. Watkins? Yes.
I just want to remind you, Mr. Watkins, come to the microphone.
Gotta come to the microphone.
If I would have known this, I wouldn't have said anything else, but
Yeah.
I just wanted to add on to the Buckeye thing that you had talked about earlier with the career day when we were there. We always get told every year when we leave there that our kids are the best behaved, and it was obvious as presenters that that is the truth. And one thing that they told us today, or this time, that really kind of hit home with us, and this is why we do this, that our staff, when they are there, our middle school staff goes and sees our current juniors and seniors that are there in the labs and want to congratulate them and show them, you know, how much we still care about them. And the Buckeye people told us that no other staff does that with their kids like the Claymont staff does.
Thank you, Brian.
And I want to toot your horn though, but you did have one student approach you who's up there and said they thanked you for pushing them during junior high and not giving up on them, because that's why they're successful today.
Yeah, it was, I'm not gonna mention any names, but it was one that was in our office a lot. Yeah, and he actually, I didn't even see him coming, he actually like grabbed the door on my side and said, thank you. And that's what I told Mr. Wrench and when we were in there, you know, that then you realize, you know, why you're doing it. And I said, thank you, you know, for saying that to me. And one thing that we always tell him is that when we stop hitting on you, that's when we need to work.
Ms. Khan, in your report or whatever, we have our valedictorian and salutatorian this year. So Emily Leister and Ariana Parakitas.
Yeah, two excellent students, we're really proud of them.
Congratulations on them. Ms. Marsh, I did read your report. Mr. Wrench did talk about it. So how, just in question you, how did you think? I mean, I did read your report. Mr. Wrench hit on it a little bit earlier when we got started. What did you think? What was your overall with the drill?
I'll remind you, come to the mic.
Yeah.
Honestly, I think it went well for our kind of first time with a larger building, a larger staff, more students. I think we worked together. It took us, we probably had the drill open for a little less than 2 hours. And by then, you know, kind of the crowd had died off and we sort of got ready to dismiss as usual. But really, I mean, I included quite a few numbers in there for you to see what our participation was and how many students and.
Bigger room next time, you said.
Yeah, and
Okay.
really, there's a lot of fixes to that, without a doubt. That's one that was suggested. I've thought a lot about it since then. There's a lot of fixes within that room, so I think to do that without kind of getting a line is probably not realistic. So, you know, we did have a little bit of line, but it just kind of flowed and went through, so.
So I have a couple things on these administrative reports. First of all, I want to thank Jody Miles for her work on the curriculum. So I've been at those meetings and I just want to thank you. I feel like you've done a great job bringing everybody together and listening to what they had to say and trying to figure out what would be the best approach for every one of them. So I appreciate the work that you put on that, because I know it's a lot of work. I think I texted you a couple Sundays ago at like 9 o'clock at night because I drove by and I'm like, go home, you know. So I just want to give you accolades because I feel like you totally deserve that. I mean, I appreciate all that you do for our district. I want to thank Beth and Ms. Khan, the tables that you're getting out at the high school for outdoor learning. Plus, I think it's going to just make this space a little bit nicer overall. So I appreciate your guys' effort on that as well. And Andrea, is Andrea here? $80,000 in grants to upgrade our facilities for our kitchens. Thank you. Like, that is just phenomenal. So here's my thing. Yeah. So I totally appreciate that. And I think Mr. Watkins, I already thanked you for all the information you give. We have a lot of great things happening in our district. And Mr. Kozar, I appreciate you taking the time to come here and speak on it and to kind of bring it to fruition for everybody to see. But I think the entire board is truly appreciative of all that we have, because you guys are what makes Claymont successful. So. I'm done. Sorry, Lois.
Right. I'm in for it.
Do you want me to go into Buckeye and then I could just be finished
Yep,
speaking?
yeah.
So the Buckeye House is going up for auction on May 9th. We're actually starting in this month, next month for the next house. They also had a partnership development summit for HR and HR hiring personnel, which actually, I think I learned about it in our January meeting. I took it back to, I work in Louisville, took it back to our HR people, and they came down and went to it as well, because we do landscape construction, design, build, and install. So they had 35 organizations that showed up for that with over 50 participants. So I thought that was really good as well. So great things are happening at Claymont as well, which, you know, we have a high number of students at from Claymont that are at Buckeye. So success is all around. So I appreciate that, and everybody else who helps. So now I am done, because that's my Buckeye report.
Do we, telehealth, or we have your report? Okay, I'll go here.
Yeah, but if you want to go.
Okay, I'm gonna go CEA.
Nothing further.
You're good, okay. OPSI. OPSI, do we have a report from OPSI? Okay, so I guess we go to.
Just at your desk, when you sat down this evening, I just wanted to give you an update. There were a couple updates in that. Our telehealth, we've had 246 visits from year to date as of March 6th, whenever I received this email from Jamie Lewis through the Altman Orville Care Center. 175 students, 70 faculty. They've had, this is the big thing that I know Courtney, she's here, but she'll agree with me later, but the referrals to specialists in primary care, we've had 12. So we've had 10 students being referred for either to a specialist or a primary care physician. And we've actually had staff members getting a primary care physician as well through this. We've had 28 referrals for testing and radiology, 19 students and 9 faculty. And return to class or work, 141, 87 students and 54 faculty members. The goal is to continue with the telehealth for next year. The grant is coming. We may or may not have that third nurse, just because that was provided through the grant, but that all of those tools that we have are still available for us to access for next year. And their goal is to continue this. Just touch base on the telehealth, though, they also want to expand and put a clinic in, and we're taking a look at our high school as an option on Miss Khan's side to adjust that to make those some clinic areas for an outpatient clinic that our kids could go to, but more importantly, our families could go to. So Altman's very committed, and any renovation for that goes through Altman. So it's not on our dollar that happens. So we're committed to making sure that we can do the best we can for those students. And the other thing I gave was the just an update on enrollment. So you could look at that one as at your leisure. I do have, so Beth, if you could help me with the PowerPoint. I just want to kind of update, and I'll try to be quick, but I don't want to be in a rush. But our proposed state legislation and government, and I want to highlight 2 different things through this. One was our governor's proposed budget, and also the impacts of House Bill 1. Bottom line, the meetings that I've gone to, what I'm hearing is the state has money. So in the gross recurring fees, their fiscal year is $9 billion, and that's an increase of 6.4 from the previous year. And then they're looking at for fiscal year 25 at 9.2 billion, which would be a 2.1 from 2024. Now, if you're not familiar with the Fair School Funding Plan, that has been in talk and conversation that I've been familiar with since about 2015. And that's where leveling the playing field for funding schools. Maybe some of you would remember the DeRolf case that was back in around 92. And I was working on my master's degree in 95, 96. And we were talking about that. And it's taken many, many years to make that happen. But the Fair School Funding Plan were Cupp and Patterson, Bob Cupp and John Patterson. And their Fair School Funding Plan is that they're looking at a 50% increase for fiscal year 24 and then 6.6 for fiscal year 25. I want to highlight though, it says they're basing the cost for this, the base cost inputs unchanged. They're still going to use salaries from fiscal year 18. They're not adjusting the salaries from there, but also this is just a governor's budget. So the Office of Business and Management has yet to put forth any reports, but I know that Kim received a report the other day, potential as far as what we would receive, and she can jump in any point in time.
The simulation that I received was that just taking the amount of enrollment and everything as is, like next year we would be looking at a decrease of like $1,000. But then the following year, we're making that back and we get a little bit extra, but it's not much. And you know, the 50% and the 66.6% is that phase in that's supposed to take 6 years to get to the 100%.
So we're pretty flatlined then
Yes.
for the next couple of years.
Yes, because overall, even from the very beginning, we were only going to see maybe an increase through those 6 years of like $100,000. It wasn't going to be a big change for us.
So just to highlight on the governor's budget, the governor, and I bolded there, the science of reading. As I talked to the administrators the other day, it says it's not made Ohio State fond of this because Fountas Pinnell is not on the science of reading. And what's the science of readings? Well, if you were a second and third grade teacher, you went through letters training. So we are moving with letters training next year for the rest of the group that needs that, because that's part of science of reading. Orton Gillingham, Haggerty. So those steps are being taken for us to continue. But they're looking on this is that they're proposing all this amount of money. But there was one, it might not be on this highlight, but yeah, 100 regional literacy coaches. Now, we say that we're getting this money or potentially out there of $174.1 million for the improvement of a budget item for literacy. There are 600 some districts in the state of Ohio. So that's a lot of money, but still, that doesn't mean that we're going to get all that. And everything that they're talking about, there is a district share. It's not, we're paying for all literacy coaches across the state. We have to come up with the extra money to do so. On the next slide, it kind of highlights, they're talking about capital improvements. When we were down with Mrs. Wagner receiving her award, see, I have to highlight you one more time, Mrs. Wagner, that when John Cupp was talking, but also he's talking about capital improvements. And the CORES group, the Coalition of Ohio and Rural Appalachian Schools, is pushing very hard to get schools, districts who haven't been able to build to have that opportunity. And for those who have built, have another opportunity. But said because the big 8 schools, Columbus, Toledo, Cleveland, Cincinnati areas, they all have new schools across everywhere. So there's a push on that. So there is some things that they're highlighting in this budget in that. Also, I just want to highlight strengthening the business advisory councils and giving incentives. We were with the East Central Ohio, and they're a 3 out of 5 stars on the their ratings. Higher education, you know, going with one thing I do want to highlight on that is the third bullet down. they're looking to appropriate through the governor's proposed budget, $15 million for training for additional high school teachers in the area of CCP. So it's been Mrs. Khan's goal, as far as been taking over, having CCP offerings at our high school. We have Stark State, Akron, we have kids go to Kent. But if we have teachers who can teach those courses, and I have to have a master's in science to teach CCP. I have to have a master's in English to teach CCP. I just can't have a master's in education to teach science for CCP. But if that comes through, that would be something that I would hope that we're looking at taking somewhat advantage of there for us in that aspect. Here's where we don't like potentially some of the decisions that are being made as far as community schools getting some money. And you can advance it to the next slide. Currently community schools get $1,750 per student, and they want to raise that to $3,000. And I'll hit it in a couple of later slides there too. But the community schools are not being forgotten in this proposed budget. The next slide, Mr. Cottrell talked about, and he and I have talked about it, SROs. They're appropriating $388 million for school resource officers. And again, that goes, district must share some of the costs. It's not that if Kim has the budget that we're potentially losing $1,000 in funding, and we say we want to look at an SRO, how does that fit within our current budget? So that is something that we, as a board, would have to make that decision on what are we going to look at using monetarily to get to there. And also $7.5 million in school health-based centers. There's a big push from the state on that. And just a couple of different things on other relevant sports gambling. 15 million was earmarked for public and non-public schools. Vouchers. The House, the Senate, and the governor, all those budgets will have vouchers. But here's the thing that they're looking to, in this budget, raising it from 250% income base to 400. That just raised your availability for families to get a voucher to take their kids someplace else. And I'm gonna say, I'm gonna use that voucher and I'm going. So that's a concern on our part of it. For us there. And the next piece here is the House Bill 1. We as property tax owner or property owners, here's some things that could potentially, it's going to hit us in the pocketbook if this passes, but also it's going to hit us in the pocketbook as a district. It says, currently we are assessed at 35% of fair market value of our property. So if my property is valued at $100,000, I'm being assessed at $35,000. I kept the math simple. My wife was the math teacher. So I kept it simple that I could do. So 35%. We also, through the state says, well, we feel bad for you. So we're in a position where we can give you a 10% cut off of that also. So there's a rollback. So, and then, then also home occupied homeowners receive an additional 2.5% credit for their tax bills. And the state reimburses the districts for what is lost. That's the current system. So we're not really out as a district. So moving into the next slide, here's proposed. They want to go from 35% property tax to 31.5%. And that'd be about a 10% reduction. And I underlined there that if this goes through, they can't exceed 31.5%. And I don't, Kim, if you wanted to, you talked to the auditor yesterday, and I don't know if you want to share what he said.
Yeah, I sat through a couple webinars so far on this, and then I made an appointment with Larry, our Tuscarawas County auditor, yesterday, and he's like, there's going to be amendments to this, because he's like, I heard some of it too, but I'm like, but I need to understand this, and because OASBO, they put out a calculator and they're only showing the reduction is going to hit on inside millage. So we might only lose $86,000. Well, then when I talked to Larry, he's like, well, that wasn't my understanding. I thought it was across on all millage, which he has projected then that we would lose over $400,000. So I'm like, that's a big difference. Like, we gotta and he's like, you know, kind of like, just calm down and let's see this through. Give us a couple months and we'll figure it out. So, but that's the type of money we possibly are looking at from property taxes.
So the change on this would result in 10% cut in property tax owners, and then also a 10% reduction in revenue for schools and local governments. We complain about our streets we're having potholes. That's this money that we're losing is what would be fixing potholes. So the next slide, it talks about, okay, if they do this, eliminating the 10% property tax rollback, but they would say that they'd have a 2.5% owner tax rollback, but a flat tax credit of $125. Homeowners, this is where we pick up the difference. Homeowners are going to be picking up the difference in this reduction. So the General Assembly says they're not going to, they don't want to, over the next couple of years, they don't know what the impact's going to be, but the impact potentially is going to be, we as a school district are going to have to somehow make up a difference. The last slide is, if you are over, I do believe if you're over 65, you get the homestead exemption where you get also another reduction on your property tax. If this passes, that goes away. So our seniors will be paying more. And also there would be a 2.75 flat income tax rate. So my assessment on that is the middle guy is the one big loser in all this because they don't have that to go back where they're having an extra 2.75% income tax. So if you feel compelled to talk to our legislators, and you'd like some emails and or phone numbers to say, hey, this impacts our school. We do have a legislator that lives within our district that is at the state level. So if you guys are interested in communicating that with him, because this isn't good for schools and paying bills. Bottom line is, at what point are you going to have to go back to the voters to say, hey, we lost $86,000 or $400,000. We need to operate the school. So let's kind of give you kind of an update on where we stand with that.
Thanks for the great news.
Lois.
Great news. Do we have any other administrative reports? Anybody want to share? We might allow one. Oh, she's up there.
We want to, or
We want to go ahead.
should I just go into
Yeah,
my
go
report?
into
now?
one.
No,
We'll
she's
do
over
the
there.
treasurer's report.
You can go to phones. So general fund revenues on a projected budget right now should be around 67%. We're slightly higher at 68.19%. I did receive 2 advances on our property tax collections in February. And our final settlement, I'm actually picking that check up on Monday. So I believe that one's going to be another 1.2 million. So we'll end up with this collection about 3.2. Excess cost. We received $97,494 from the state. That is special education costs above the average for open enrolled students in. So open enrolled students in that we're servicing, we can charge back to their home district if it goes above a certain threshold. So if you go to revenues, expenditures then.
Okay.
Yep. That third bullet point also shows, when our students are enrolled out, they're charging us back. And that totaled $311,616. So we're taking about a $200,000 or over a $200,000 hit on that. But our expenditures as of the year, again, it's projected 67%. We're only at 63.88. So we're still controlling the budget well. 87% of that is for salaries and benefits. Our SR fund, February activities, we're sitting at that for SR2 on the costs that are already outstanding for the boilers, the gym doors at the middle school, which I believe have been
They're
installed now, so we'll be paying that bill. The catwalk up on the roof at the high school, that's been installed, so that will be coming off, and then partial payment or partial monies coming from SR2 for the roof over at the intermediate that will be done this summer. SR3 funds, we did have 138,832 that I received reimbursement for through SR3, which was through wages, benefits, boilers, math curriculum, and the design and engineering services for our security improvements at the offices. Outstanding purchase orders, we have 2.1 million in the curriculum design and engineering services for the entrances, the intermediate roof, the masonry work we're going to have done at the intermediate, chillers for all the buildings, the project management for the entrances, and the construction contract for the entrances. So that leaves us as of right now a balance of 737,000 in that. For the month of February, for state and federal programs, I was seeking reimbursement of $350,000 for all of the grant monies that you see there. So that leaves us at month end with a general fund balance at about $8.3 million and total fund balances of 9.3. Any questions about the financials?
Beth, have you spoke with either mayor about the parking at the middle school?
Yes, I left a message with the middle school about the handicap parking, and they have not gotten back to me. What was the other question? you
Then
had?
the
Up here?
Yeah.
I have not, I think they were wanting to kind of wait on the handicap because they're looking at not this summer, but next, doing some improvements on that road. So I think that would be the time to maybe change some things
Restripe
around,
or-
possibly
Yeah.
restripe, do everything differently.
We did
there.
have a discussion with Mayor
But
DiDonato
we did talk to him
about
about
whether
it.
that's a one-way street during certain hours or just permanently. But they don't have the money when we were talking about putting that drain in and things.
Yeah.
The money that he thought they would have, they don't have, so he's gonna ask on the back burner for another year. But I will speak about the mayors. I do have a meeting with Bell Everett, the service director for Yurtsville, regarding a walking trail path from Yurtsville town out toward the high school. So I have that meeting tomorrow. It's 9:30. So that's a group that's got a grant and being a part of that as a school.
Was that sign ever put back up that was taken down?
It hasn't yet. It was moved into the maintenance where they can refurbish it. And I know they were looking at painting it, and it needed to be powder coated again, a couple spots because of the road splash.
Do we have any addendums or corrections to the?
Are we moving in board discussion to later? Because I do want to talk about the
I'm sorry.
board attorney
Okay.
and just in general terms.
I'm sorry.
Board attorney, about the board in general, and the legal representation as far as. It was my understanding, and I just want to be clear for everybody so that we all as the board understand as regards to if we have a question or something that we need to reach out to the attorney that. That we are able to do that.
Okay.
That's,
Okay.
I just want to make sure that we're all on the same page with that.
Okay, I spoke with Donna at Pepper and Wagner. I spoke to her and she reached out to her, the rest of her firm. Okay, it has been past practice that only the superintendent, treasurer, board president makes the calls when there is general questions that are asked, like the general questions that were asked in executive session last week or last. Okay. Due to the fact you just don't want numerous calls regarding the same issue, she said that she would, that if we want to form a policy or procedure, that we can do that as our team. We can direct that to the policy and procedure team. One of the things we need to look at is that if we call the attorney, if we decide to call the attorney, we have a question. And it's not, that's board related that we want to ask. If you don't personally, if they don't want me to ask the question, she said we should designate something because the meter's running. So if I call, the meter runs. If Aaron calls and asks the same question, the meter runs again. Steve, we can, if we all 5 call, then we just 5 times our call.
No, I completely get that. I completely understand that. And 99% of the time, nobody's ever gonna call the attorney, but the board president. But there are times that there could be a question that another board member has that needs the, or wants the opinion of the board attorney. And I feel like that should be an option that we should be able to pick up the phone and call. I was on the board when we hired Pebble and Wagner back in 2016. I remember that being a discussion that well, it was made clear to us then, you know, I work for the board, anybody can reach out. Now, as a general rule, most people don't, but there are times that it may warrant, you know, hey, I just want to get clarification. Hey, I'm not sure about this,
Right.
or hey, this is the direction the board is moving, and I'm not sure where I'm at on that, and want to make sure I don't put myself in a position that I can't get out of. So I don't ever remember back then about, you know, only certain people can contact. That was never a discussion. I also reached out to 10 other board members in 10 other districts to ask, hey, how do you guys handle this? General rule is it does go through the board president, but they are all able, because the attorney works for the board, to reach out, and the attorney takes the call, knowing that,
Right.
hey,
And
be
she-
very discreet on what you're doing, because it does cost the district money. So nobody would waste, you know,
Right.
time, effort, money, or energy on that.
And I, as the board president, of course, I don't make the rules, you know. Donna said if we want to develop a policy, that it's open door, but then as the board president sitting here, then when I have somebody then say, I want to pull the agenda and I want to see who's costing the attorney fees. And that's been quite frequently complaining about the attorney fees. So I just want everybody to know, she doesn't, you know, she's in business. She don't care. Like she said, you all 5 can call me and ask me what the weather is today. I don't care.
Completely agree.
Yeah. but she
It's
don't care.
not, and it's not even that, it's just the fact that if I have a question, then obviously I love you, Lois, so it's not anything against you.
Sure,
but-
hey, I have
but
no
what if
problem with it.
But what if there were an issue that I felt
Yeah, she did
with the
say,
board president that I wanted to go to the attorney and say, hey, I don't think this is right,
correct,
then I should have that option to go to the board attorney. She should take my call because I'm on the school board and she works for the entire school board. And I should be able to get my questions answered. So I felt like it was important that as a board, we talked about that just to make it
oh,
clear
absolutely,
that,
that was one
you
of
know,
my
hey,
issues.
99% of the stuff's gonna go through the board attorney. But there could be that 1% of stuff that if Cindy Host calls Donna needs to take my call because I'm obviously stuck because I'm calling you and I have an issue that I think needs attention.
Is that call recorded?
No.
I mean, do we make the call like we did in the past? Come here, so 2 or 3 people are hearing that conversation, so everybody's getting the same.
Well,
I definitely like email correspondence because what happens, and is, you know, sometimes there's phone calls and then you're seeing emails after the fact and all you can do is infer, right? So, and that's a shady area to be in, inference,
Okay,
so.
if we follow the sunshine law, technically, if we would have a attorney and multiple people would be present while she was speaking to us, that's, we have to have it, we
I'm saying
have
if I
to
had,
have.
if I had to make a phone call and you're meeting me here to make it with Mr. Wrench, it's not a meeting.
Then-
Correct.
Correct,
Correct.
it could only be
Two.
I'm just allowing my conversation to be heard with 2 or 3 others, so I'm not hung out to dry and it's not hearsay.
Right.
correct, correct. And I highly recommend, we'll go ahead and do this, right, for discussion. I have another.
Don't have to do a policy.
Yeah, and if we want to refer this to the policy committee, I spoke with Donna about this issue about being available and things like that. She doesn't have a problem. She said, but she wants it to be known that she can just take open calls from the board members. She doesn't, you know, she said, it's just been private. She went back and researched, because when she speaks to somebody, she puts who they are. And she said, I researched back to 2016, and she said, I've only ever spoke 1 or 2 times to somebody other than
Right.
the president. And she said, but she said, she'll be real honest. She has school districts where attorneys in her office, they'll receive 5 calls from their school board. And she said, and they have a very large bill. So she said, it's just something, and she said, and if it becomes an issue on your board that it's a lot of people are abusing it, she said, then you may want to, you know, look at your policy. But
And I don't know that we need a policy either. I just, and I agree. I know over the time, because probably on her list, I'm one of them, because I feel like I recall talking to her back then, and I wasn't the board president. I don't think, again, 99% of the time, I think whatever the questions are, come to the board president. But I think that as a board member, if I have a question and I'm struggling with a dilemma, and I don't want to go back into what it was back then, because I specifically remember it. I feel like I should have that opportunity to call her and say, hey, X, Y, and Z, I don't want to do the wrong thing. I need some guidance. That's all. So if we need a policy, that's fine. If we don't need a policy.
maybe we
and
can just inform her.
and
We
this-
can
yeah, this
maybe
meeting's
reach out
enough
her
to-
and find out what she wants.
Yeah, to tell her, hey, if Cindy Host calls you, you
Take the
need to
call.
take the call, you know, type thing.
The other thing is, I wanted to bring up in board discussion is, we have to be very cautious. I'm a Sunshine Law reader. These books are free. And then there's also have one geared towards school boards only, kind of condenses or takes the little pieces out of here. Okay, one of the things that we have to be very cautious when we are, and I spoke with a high school board attorney, and I've also spoke to Donna about, is when we email and we have more than 3 people, we're communicating, we're responding. So then that becomes that we're violating the open, the sunshine law for open board meetings. So we have to be very cautious of that. So sometimes in some of the emails, I did not reply. And one of the reasons I'm not replying is because
There's already 2 of us.
there's multiple people. So I had several people question that I don't return my emails, and I can't when there's multiple board members. Another thing that I wanted to bring up is, and in the sunshine law here, we've had frequently requests for records. And we as a board are allowed to request the same as anybody in the community. But unfortunately, we have to follow rules when we're requesting. The request needs to be precise of what you're requesting and or why you're requesting it. The Ohio Supreme Court has upheld the fact that when you have a massive request and are putting in less than 24-hour deadlines, that those are inappropriate. those are inappropriate, and the highest court has already upheld that when people protested it before. So we have to be very cautious. The Sunshine Law states that we have to do a prompt response. But if we get a response that says, if I, would put in a response tonight, that by tomorrow you have to have my request in, what if Beth is in technologies on vacation or has a prior obligation, or Beth that sends it out is not available? When it's almost like a demand or a situation. Well, it's 5 to 7 days unless there's a litigation. The actual Sunshine Law does not state 5 to 7 days, but that's what the Ohio Supreme Court has upheld, that that's a reasonable time. The only time that it can be a sooner time, a request, is if you're in the middle of a litigation, or that this has been a multi request that we haven't complied to. So it kind of puts a time restraint and a push. We had a request, Kim had a meeting at a different location, Beth had something going on, and we had a request, and I called in and says, is that going to be a problem? Because I knew that they had other things going on and they had to be by a certain time. And it was a very lengthy, and that's another thing that the Sunshine Law also states, that it can't be a general statement. You can't use a word. It has to be a topic. It can't be, I want to say vague. It can't be anything with the word Joe in it or Sally in it. I want every email or text with a name. It has to be, what subject are you looking for? And it's very well spelled out in overly broad requests, and it's in the chapter 2 of the Sunshine Code. And it says in here, so technically what could have happened is they could have, for the request, came back and said you have to narrow it down. They also, if it's a broad thing like that, it can't be longer than 10 months. The span can't be unless there's a litigation or something. So I just recommend that when people are requesting, this is free knowledge, please just look into it. That way there doesn't put a burden on the school district. And then there is things in the book they'll tell the general public that are making a record request that you can't have. And there's reasons, for confidentiality, employee, now we as a board, we have a different rules and regulation according to that. But this book here, I'll get it for $20.
I only have the other one.
It's a good one. It's a little, the Ohio Sunshine Law is for all public. Your general reading. This one here is geared just towards school boards. So those were two things I wanted to bring up in board discussion.
Well, Kim, you usually answer the public records requests. What's your usual turnaround time on that kind of stuff? Does it just depend on?
If I respond, hopefully in a week, or it depends if I have time.
Yeah, no, I that's
But
fair.
yeah, it's,
You usually try to do it within a
we
week,
try to do it, I
Then
try
I
to do it within a week.
That's fair. I mean, it's fair. I'm just.
And five to,
Yeah.
within a week, yeah.
And that's what, according to that's what's nice about this, they go into, because it really doesn't in the Sunshine Law state.
Right, everything's vague.
It's vague,
State.
so,
I mean,
but then
you
it
can
goes
infer.
into,
Right.
then it refers to, I think it's Serve versus Glazier
Yeah.
lawsuit that stated, and it was upheld by the Ohio Supreme Court, that
And I'll
5
tell
to
you,
7 days is considered prompt.
my last 2 audits, I've had to supply everything for public records requests, because that was one of the things high on the audit list. So,
Right. Yeah.
I mean, they've never said anything about my time frame, so I think I'm doing okay with them.
No, it's reasonable. I mean, it's
Yeah.
reasonable.
And
if
it
it's within
says
a week, yeah.
if the request, and it spells it out here, if the request is a large request, then you can expect further delays.
Yeah.
And it's real easy reading. It's
Well, and I think that's
Simple.
fair, and I think, the fact that we're in public session and it's recorded, and then, other people have an idea of what the expectation is too,
Right,
if you
correct.
make a public records request to the school district, so.
Yeah.
For me, it was just making sure that,
again, 99% of the time, right? Everything's gonna run through your school board president, but there's that 1% of time that somebody has a question that maybe needs to go outside of that,
Right.
and I just wanted to make sure that
And
it was, you know, hey,
I don't want to,
I can call and ask, you know.
and as the board president, I do not want to be like I'm the, the holy person up here, ruler, because I'm just the same boat as everybody else.
Agreed.
And when somebody requested, and they said, Los, do you care? And I'm like, well, I was basically, why would I care? And then Donna said that that's general policy since that you have that, and I was like, oh, I didn't know that, so.
Yeah, I think I even said that to Donna, like, I don't know about that because I was on the board when we hired you and I remember explicitly those conversations, but it's neither here nor there. It's just more of a matter of everybody's on the same page. now.
Everybody's on the same page.
Everybody's on the same page. So if I pick up the phone and call Donna tomorrow because I have an issue, then, answer my call, take my question and let me know, and then I would let Kim know, hey, I called Donna, type thing. So.
And she suggested that if there was going to be multiple people, that they let somebody know that, so that it doesn't look like she's frigid,
Right. That it
Well,
shows up on the-
ultimately, we'll
right.
get a bill and Kim's gonna know as well. And as a, in my world, right, if Kim's getting a bill and she's seeing a repetitive issue with a certain, the same board member, it's Kim's obligation to bring it to us as a board and say, hey, we had X amount of money, but 80% of that was by Cindy Host calling Donna, because then as a board, you should be coming to Cindy Host and going, what are you doing?
Right.
You
Do your own
do your,
research.
do your own research or call your own attorney.
Yeah.
Why are you calling the board attorney?
And
Same thing.
we do, in all of these, because I didn't want it to be our attorney versus, so I did consult high school board attorneys too, when I was checking things out to make sure that I was doing it correctly and that our attorney was giving us the correct information. I was kind of double checking, and of course, that's a free service, so
Yep.
you have the right to do that. And Donna suggests, I told her that I would be doing that. Matter of fact, she even gave me some names of people to call, and they both acknowledged that. I have one other thing that I want to do in board discussion I want to bring up. We are starting what they call interest-based bargaining, IBB, with the CEA. We were trained in January. We attended a training with both teams. Doug, I think it's Colwyn. He's the one who taught us about IBB, and then he's also going to be our team leader in our facilitator for the process. I'm looking very forward to, I'm assuming it's going to be a very smooth transition, but there's a few questions that were asked. Donna shared with me the Ohio Ethics Commission. On our current board, we have two CEA spouses, one OPSI spouse. CEA, when we're doing CEA negotiations, Aaron and Cindy won't be privileged to be in an executive session if there's any discussion about negotiation. If it's an OPSI issue, Stevie.
You sure on that?
Yes.
On executive session?
Mhm.
I think we're allowed to
And-
be in
Oh.
there,
You're
but
just
not
not
participate.
Yeah.
Which I'm to the public, my wife is on the negotiating team for CEA. And I am a board member, which I have no part. I will abstain from everything, just letting you guys know, I don't want anything to do with it.
Yeah. According to and I think she sent that to us, the Ohio Ethics, so I didn't read.
Well, and it says that if the statute prohibits a person who has an interest in the outcome of bargaining, which is in conflict with the public employer's interest, from participating on behalf of the public employer in the collective bargaining process, except that the person may vote on ratification of the agreement.
Right.
This is a statute. Now that has since been changed and updated because I get health insurance from the school district. I am not permitted to vote on when it comes before the board. and I cannot participate on behalf of the board.
Correct.
So I'm excluded and Aaron is excluded from participating because of Veronica and Craig in essence, and
And Veronica
Steve
is an
when with
officer.
Chris,
So
when-
he's-
whenever that's it. Yeah.
Veronica is an officer, so, okay.
And I'm fully
yes,
aware of that,
it's-
so I understand my role as a board member.
And it's changed, like it wasn't, previously, we weren't able to actively participate, but once it was agreed, once there was a TA and the union accepted it,
Correct.
then as board members, we could vote on it. That
Right.
has changed.
Right.
So in my.
What I'm saying, so when we adjourn out here, go into executive session, I just want the public to know in open forum that the reason Cindy and Aaron at this time, if we're going back to discuss anything with negotiation, they will not be present. If it was an OPSI, then Stevie wouldn't be present. Or Mr. Morrow, Stevie. I was his babysitter. So
That'll never go away.
also there was a question raised regarding the IBB meeting. I brought this to Doug, which is the federal mediation, and I also spoke to somebody at the Ohio State Board, which is also an advisor for the mediation teams. And both stated the question that was brought up was about the ethics, and they both, same thing that the attorney said, the same thing that Cindy just read. Those are opinions. So both of them stated that this is not law, but it is opinions. But in the court of law in the state of Ohio, that opinion will be upheld in court. So I wanted to state that. So if somebody says that's not law, what Cindy just read there, that is an ethic commission opinion.
Advisory, yep.
And it will be, but it will in the state of Ohio be upheld as law. Okay, so that thing. And then another thing was the makeup of the team. So I wasn't real familiar, I'm familiar with traditional negotiations. I'm not real familiar with IBB. So I went ahead and did some research. Doug informed me that the team consists of 6 people, an attorney, superintendent, treasurer. Usually in most districts that have a curriculum director, a principal. If a school district does not have a curriculum director, then it is some smaller schools call them lead team, lead teacher, lead principal, or lead principal. I don't know how I forget how they called that principal if there wasn't a curriculum director. But that usually those 2 positions and then 1 board member, that would make up the thing. And Cindy's question, I think it was, that we were questioning whether administration should be on the board, on the team. Both parties that I spoke to stated, and I just wrote it down almost, and they both said it almost word for word, both stated that the principal and the curriculum director bring ideas and issues to the team, that they better understand the language that's needed for the day-to-day operations because they're in the building directing that day-to-day operations. They work directly with the CEA. So CEA, it's a benefit to them also because I, as a board member, I don't know what's going on in the building as a day-to-day operation, but the language that's needed in the contract will assist the administrators and be helpful for the CEA members to perform their day-to-day operations. And then, and ironically, both of them said it almost to the T. So I said, well, who better would have an input than the principals that are directing the CEA? So that kind of is how the team is made up. Doug's been doing it, he said, for multiple years. He has never seen any other makeup on the board, or on the team, other than he has been in small schools where the transportation person has been on the team. He said transportation / food service. He said, but if you have your curriculum director, it's usually better to have 2 principals. He said, and the observers are usually, he said, usually the observer is another principal. And he said, and that's just for input. For better language purposes.
And because I did have some questions about this and just in full transparency and disclosure, back in January after our board meeting, I asked about it, and said, hey, because it wasn't on our agenda in January as a committee, and the same 10 districts that I reached out to on the attorney component of it, I asked them, like, how does this work? And it's a committee that's on the agenda in January and it's voted on. So it wasn't on ours. So there was no discussion about it. So
I mean, a committee for the.
there's a negotiation committee,
Okay.
right? That's on for the board to approve. And so I inquired because it was my thought that having you and Michelle both on the committee as president and vice president would be beneficial in a couple different ways. I know when we talked about this year, even, you were Steve's vice president, we were talking about last year, who's going to be the vice president, right? And the discussion we had was, sorry, Michelle's pretty green, right? She's not been on the board before. Lois, you have experience. For her to be your vice president is good because she'll be able to learn from you. And then the discussion was, Michelle, when you become president next year, I'll become the vice president again, because she's kind of saddled with people. And my thought was, when her being on a negotiation committee is for her to understand what that role looks like, right? Because we kind of get lost sometimes, and it's admittedly as board members, members of the community, we have friends who are in the union and whatnot. So sometimes we just need to understand what our role is. And that's not a hit against Michelle by any means. It's just, I felt like, boy, it'll be really good for her to see what that looks like, right? To understand what that negotiation looks like between the two parties. So I had asked for that in January. Hey, can we ask about that? Right. And then I thought we were going to ask about it. That was January 12th. And then there was some discussion about whether or not the ground rules had been done. We were going to check through all this data that I got. It was over 2 weeks later before the ground rule email came out, and there was no discussion that I found anyway in email format in regards to that. Later on, found some communication again through all this email. Kudos to Mr. Wrench back in September of last year, knowing negotiations were coming up, right? He's inquiring, like, where does Aaron kind of fit into that because of Veronica being an officer of the union. So kudos to you. I appreciate that. I read through all of that. And then again, in February, I asked, hey, where are we at? Then maybe a week or so ago, asked again, because I really hadn't heard anything, like, where are we at on this? Are we able to change who they are? Because again, Michelle being on the negotiation committee has no direct bearing on me as the spouse of a member of the union, because she represents the board. So then there was some discussion on, me making that recommendation as being an active role in negotiations. And if I go back to the September 20th email that we were provided, it's very explicit, like, what active negotiations looks like in that email. So there was that, and then there was another email that just came out on the 27th. And I'll apologize to you, Mr. Wrench, now, because I took great offense to it when I got the email, not realizing you were copying and pasting until I got all of the data. So I really thought that the email that you sent to us as board members was you saying it to our attorneys. And I was completely offended, which I'm sure you knew that. I'm sure it was very clear. I was offended by what was said. So then I took the information there, and I also have other contacts in, because at one point it was in here that Because I have a family member in the bargaining unit, I can't have an active role, and that it could clearly be argued that voting on the membership of the board's bargaining team would be prohibited. So I then go reach out to other people that I know and other resources I have, and they say, yeah, it could be clearly argued that it is, and it could clearly be argued that it isn't. Because it's a committee that your board didn't even vote on, and most boards have that as a committee and they vote on it. So, and I don't want to get into this or that of it necessarily. I was extremely offended. I'm not going to lie. I mean, I think everybody on this board knew how offended I was, because I really felt like Mr. Wrench, I felt like you were attacking me, and who I was and what I stood for, that I would have some personal gain in Michelle being on the negotiation committee, and that wasn't my intent at all. So, after compiling all of this together and realizing what had happened, I would just recommend that maybe instead of cutting and pasting, you just forward us the whole thing so I can get the whole content. And maybe even to you, Lois, I owe an apology. I think you came back and said, I don't understand why you think that. And again, it was before I had all of everything. It was cut and pasted into, and by cutting and pasting, it really looked like an attack on me personally. I felt like, and I'm sure that probably wasn't your intent. But I would just maybe say if you have correspondence, or maybe it was, I don't know. I would just say if you have communication, maybe just forward it, so we can see the whole content behind it, or the context in which it is, because I personally wouldn't want to think that you guys were attacking me personally. But in the little bit of information that I got, that's kind of what I felt like. So I'm going to apologize publicly for that, because after I got this mess of other stuff that I printed out and I kind of filtered through, I kind of figured out I figured out how it was coming into play. So the problem with it, I would just tell you, is that it's an email after the fact. There's no content or context for me to go back on. I can only make assumptions or inferences, right? Like, you had a conversation and this is what came out of it. But I don't know what you said, and I don't know what you said, and you know what I mean? So it just makes it really hard for me. That's all I wanted to make sure.
I thought my integrity was, at the last executive session, 2 questions were asked. One, could we change the negotiation team? Has already been set. 2, oh, wait a minute, I'm trying to know how to stop my train of thought. Who all sits on the negotiation team? Okay, so I took those 2 questions, just like they were asked to me, to her. I didn't add because I've been doing this for years. I didn't add anything to it, and I didn't take away anything. I said, is Cindy and Aaron, what's their role in the picking of the negotiation team, or sitting in an executive session while I got my reply? What can the negotiation team has already been set. It's already, the ground rules were made by Donna and by Kelly Miller. Are we allowed to change the ground rules? And then the next question is, who normally sits on negotiation teams? That was your question about principals and curriculum directors and things like that. I think that was the question.
Yeah, mine was more the principal. I felt like it was the principal in an awkward position,
So-
because they have to deal with the team.
That's how I asked it.
And I'm not saying
But
that
I didn't add anything. Now, what she adds to it, like she said, it's not like she's new to our board. She's been here, so she knows the dynamics that have been in the past. So she came up with a conclusion and said, and she also sent out at that time, she sent out the opinion, the Ethics Commission's opinion. She sent me a copy of that. I forwarded on to Mr. Wrench and said, this is what I received. As I asked the 2 questions in executive session as the board president, I did that, and here's the reply.
And the only response I would say to that is, on January 12th, I asked about it. And I had to keep asking about it. And I never got a response. And so when we talked about it last month, we're coming down to the wire, and I'm like, where are we on this? Because back in January, when I asked about it,
Yes, me?
no, I asked Mr. Wrench. I asked Mr. Wrench about it because I was trying to get ahead of it. And again, knowing Michelle just came on the board, knowing what I felt was going to be value, like, hey, can we ask the question, right? Like, can the board vice president be on that committee? You know, because again, it wasn't anything that we talked about or voted on or anything like that. And then I believe in this massive amount of paperwork that I have here, it was like January 25th that the email was sent to Kim and Mr. Rent and Brian of, you know, hey, these are the ground rules. This is on January, right? So again, it's for me, it's just been a perpetual question, like, hey, like, can we do this? Can we not do this? Like, where are we at on this? So I feel like it just never really has been answered. And a lot of this correspondence I have happened last Monday and Tuesday. And our board meeting was earlier in February. So again, for me, it's just, I think I said it in one of our communications, as a team, we can rock this. You know, we all have something very valuable to add to the Board of Education and to the school district. We just all have to be rowing in the same direction. Right. And I don't want something like this to interfere with our ability to be successful, because everybody sitting on this Board of Education is here, and the superintendent and treasurer, because we want what is best for Claymont students. You know, my kids went here, your kids went here, her kids are going here. Like, we know what Claymont can do and how successful our families can be. So it's our obligation as board members to work together for the betterment of Claymont City Schools. You know, Mr. Cozart, kudos to him coming up here and talking about all the great things happening at Claymont. Every one of us clapped, right? We all agree 100%. And so as a board, I just want us all to be rowing in the same direction, right? I would never do anything to bring shame or, you know, a bad image to Claymont, like and neither would any of you guys. And I just, again, I wanted to publicly apologize, because when I got your email, that's what I took it as. When I got everything else, it made sense. So
I think that I answered the question though on the two questions that we did ask, and I did investigate that, and I explained that traditional bargaining is different because you made the comment, well, we shouldn't say anything anyways, you know, and I said, well, and that Mr. Wrench would lead, you thought that Mr. Wrench would lead the negotiations for our team, and it doesn't work that way in IBB.
And I understand everybody at the table gets a voice, but I'll just be honest with you. The most important voice to me at that table is Kim Beckley. She is the financial responsibility for this district, and a lot of the stuff that we're going to talk about, that you guys are going to talk about. And I agree, everybody's important. I'm not saying that. I'm not devaluing you, and I'm not devaluing the union. No,
I'm just saying,
but they're interested in wage and benefits.
In the 4-hour class, and you can ask Michelle if you don't believe me. I don't care.
Yeah, no,
but I'm saying the 4-hour class, I would consider myself smarter than the average person. What I received from that and the knowledge I obtained from that, and matter of fact, it's quoted in here, that all members must actively participate in IBB training. And if we don't, then we're not doing IBB bargaining. So what'll happen is if we don't actively, and that's another reason why we don't put more than one person. I'm not a teacher. I'm not in the school system. So you don't want two people like me sitting there trying to get the language, or like Michelle, you don't want us and two of us sitting there when we don't bring what to the table, what somebody else would bring to the table. I would rather see neither one of us sit on there than for us to occupy 2 seats in this interest space. I just don't think it'll work. I don't think it will. We're not doing our team justice, nor are we doing our CEA justice by not following the rules of interspace. bargaining. And I know there's several people here that was at the training and they could probably elaborate on that. It's extremely different. And like I said, I did traditional bargaining. This is totally different than, we won't even, go back and get our little team together. We don't sit as a team. We don't interact as a team. In order for this to be, and we have a facilitator that will lead it. They'll lead. So, and everybody has to participate. So, but anyway, if you want to learn about there's a nice video, and it's 2.5 hours long that the federal mediation team does on English.
I'll bypass all that.
I think it's 1995. Everybody wants to do it.
So who's reaching out to Donna then, legal? Are you or the?
Let her know.
To let her know that we can call. You're going to?
Yes.
It's recorded in public session.
And then who is, or do we have to make policy?
Well, if she says we don't have it, if you don't want a policy, we can just give her permission to.
I think I mentioned that because she said, I think I asked, like, if we need a policy, then we'll make a policy, like,
Well,
I
that's
didn't.
what I
know
said
we
on the
needed one.
policy committee. I mean, that's.
Well, that's that. If
wanna
you
put
want
it-
a
put it in
policy,
writing?
she says we
Put it
can,
in
if not. We don't.
Put it in writing, let's put it in writing.
I gotta go back to IBB for 1 second. Moving forward, I think that we need to take a vote, a majority vote as to who sits on the committee, because that did not happen prior to that. And the contract is between CEA and the Board of Education.
Correct. If you would like to, if we would like to do that, we can do that. And we'll see who gets voted on. That's not a problem with me. I was on the CEA, I don't think it's called that. What's it called?
Communication Council?
Communication Council.
Communication Council. So I just continued on as board president. If we would like to bring it to vote, I'm sure that we could, if I'm not voted on as the person that, the only problem is Stevie can't participate. Have you had IBB? You have no
No.
IBB?
I would sit on it, but with the rest of them, but I don't think I'm gonna bring to the table what the principal can bring for the day-to-day operation that's gonna better explain the language, so. I don't think.
Well,
I'm,
we
you
just,
know,
can we open it? Do we have to can we add that to the agenda? To have a vote?
You
Yeah.
could technically do it now anyway. You could take nominations and
Yeah,
see
we
if
just-
the vote.
Take nominations and we'll do a vote. But
Do
unfortunately.
we want a committee? The
'Cause
last time,
I don't know how to solve the problems. I'm on the committee right now for IB, I'm on the team. If this board doesn't want me on the team, I don't have a problem with it. But
I don't even think it's.
if I need to be voted on, it needs to be voted on to see who can be on that team, then we vote. If I lose, oh, well, so what?
No,
I won't
that's
attend the
That's not the.
eight
That-
meetings.
I think we're digressing from where my point was in the beginning, right? It's a committee. It should have been on in January. We should have talked about it in January. My point isn't even. I agree. I did say, I don't think the principal should be on the committee because that puts the principal in an awkward position because they are negotiating a contract with the other side who happens to be people that they supervise. And I think that's an awkward position. And I personally wouldn't want to be in that. I have the utmost confidence in Kim Beckley on the financials, Mr. Wrench and his knowledge from being a teacher and knowing the contract, Jody Miles, by all means, on it, because she's been there as well. So I don't feel like we lose, any knowledge of that. So I admit I was the one that was like, I don't know that that's a great idea, right? My only thing was, I thought it would be a good idea if the president and the vice president, for all those reasons I've already said, we're sitting on the negotiation committee. Now, that being said, because I feel like when Aaron and I were on the board the last time we had negotiations, nobody on the board sat on the committee. So I don't even know where it came that somebody sat on the committee from the board. Like, when did that happen?
Because we're not doing traditional, you probably did traditional bargaining, and this is interest-based bargaining. It's a
I
different.
don't know that it matters who's on your committee. It wouldn't matter for the committee
What's on
what
the team?
type you do. That's what I'm saying. Like at one point, nobody on the board of education
Are
sat
you
on it.
talking about the team or the committee? I'm confused. I don't know what the committee is.
Well, the committee
Is the
would be
team.
the board representatives.
So if you're interchanging them, so here's the thing. Doug says that, and the mediator, I don't have her name.
Doug's the meeting, yeah.
Yeah, from the Ohio State Board, there's normally, Doug said he's never been on a negotiation team in IBB where there's 2 board members on there. Because unless, he said, unless one of your board members is an educator, he said, but usually, he said, they don't do that. And he even brought that up at the thing, because he said, well, you know, about who's on the team. If we want to put one person on the team, because we need the
As opposed
principal,
to,
as opposed to 2, then if we want to vote on who we put on there, I don't have a problem with that.
well, I'll be honest with you. Again, I don't know how we got to a board member on the committee, because I know them before we didn't have that. And kind of along the same lines that Steve said. And again, it's no disrespect for you. Or even Michelle. I'm not sure what value you add to it. Do
Absolutely.
you know what I'm saying?
That's what I said. I would
Michelle
rather
being
see,
there with
I would
you.
rather see, I'd rather see myself replaced with principal than myself. But you don't really want principals on there. And so it's you want to add another principal, or you want to add me or Michelle? I don't care. It's 6 days.
Can you pull the principal out when you're negotiating?
When you're
with
negotiating-
When you're negotiating finances,
Yeah, you
yes, you
pull
can
them
pull
out.
the
But they're
principal
pulling
out.
out.
So that'd be a great.
It usually becomes the treasurer and the superintendent, 'cause you're the only ones not affected. Right?
Right.
The treasurer and the superintendent are the only ones not affected by whatever wage increase happens for the union. Otherwise, they're
They've already
negotiating
built
around.
that relationship, so they're not going to just total.
Yeah.
And just pull it. Finance.
Okay, no board members.
I thought there was value added if you were on it for Michelle to be there too, in order to observe that and see how that works, right? That in my mind.
And she went to IBB training.
And she went.
Yeah.
But I agree with Steve in that it would be like me sitting on the, I'm not value added. I'm not, I don't have any experience. I'm outside of Buckeye. I've been on Buckeye's negotiation committees, but I'm not really
I've
value
negotiated.
added. you
I've
know?
negotiated a lot of contracts. I've been in business since 1986 and have supervised and negotiated
a
contracts.
union?
No, I don't have a
Right.
union,
But
but,
negotiated contracts, just
I-
like unions.
but I've also negotiated. It's not the same. I mean, we have a contract, our nursing staff, I have in my different departments, but I sit down and negotiate. It's actually harder because you don't have a union and you're negotiating individually and with
Right.
professional people. So
Yeah,
I've worked with employees, so I do think I add a little bit of value to the negotiation team. But I'm gonna be real honest, and I don't care if this offends anybody or not. I really don't care if people think I don't have any input. I mean, if I don't have no value, I know what I bring to the table. I'm not gonna sit there and say to you, I did IBB before. I'm not gonna say to you that I have an agency that has a union, but I think I do bring value to the team. But I would rather, if this is going to be a big blown out thing that we can't even, as a board, come together and put in an administrative team, what do we look like to be that we can't even come up with a honest thing here? I mean, I don't care. I don't care if I sit on it or not. I know my value, and the older you get, you find out you don't really care what other people value you as. Because you already produced that.
and I don't
Here's
disagree.
my thing is if you don't think I bring any value to this team, unfortunately, you won't be involved in the negotiations anyway, but the outcome, you'll see I'm hoping we get through this in our 5 days, and I'm sure the CEA is feeling the same way. But we can do it however anybody wants. If we want to vote on it, the 3 people that can vote on it is me, Michelle, and Steve. We can bring it up that who sits on that, and I don't have a problem with it. If I'm not one of them, then my
When
calendar's
did the-
clean 5 days.
When did a board member become part of the negotiation committee?
I don't know.
When did that happen?
It'd have to be,
Had to be
when was
after
the
us.
last time IBB, have we ever did it
It
with
doesn't,
CA?
it doesn't matter IBB or
This,
traditional.
on my,
That makes a difference.
my tenure here,
Yeah.
this would be the first time.
That we've had a board member.
We've never.
Yeah, this would be the first time.
Who said that? We've never had a board member?
Well, I take that back. Mr. Beckley was
Beckley
on
sat
with,
with
Oopsie
Oh, we saw
After,
that with
after,
at the one time.
yeah, when.
But there would be,
Prolonged forever.
from my knowledge, that would be, he was the first.
Okay,
And
so.
then Lois is the second.
Okay. Well, and I obviously don't mean to offend
You
you
ain't hurt
or
my feelings.
Michelle.
You hurt my
No, I'm not hurting your feelings. You're a big girl like I am, so you
You
don't
were
take
on
it
the
very
board,
easily.
Austin? Was you on the CEA?
Not for CEA.
Negotiation?
No, see,
OPSI,
no.
OPSI, yeah, okay. Yeah, it doesn't hurt my feelings. We would just have to notify, we have an observer on our team. If we want to take the board members off, we're off. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
I'm sorry to interrupt. We don't have a problem with whoever you choose. There's 6 positions and 3 observers. So I'm just putting it out there, our contract has 6 members and 3 observers. I don't know if that will help clarify anything for the board. The guidelines that we did, I mean, or the, I'm not saying.
Ground rules.
Thank you. The ground rules are more about the procedure and not the team.
Okay,
So if the board needs to vote on what board member they'd like to have on the team. We do have, in most bargaining, you have a multiple array of people from the district to bring in their input. We have had principals, curriculum director, superintendent, treasurer, always. Our last year, was the only one that we only had 3 members. That was the first time, this is my 7th time negotiating, that we just had 3 people, the superintendent, the treasurer, and the attorney. So that was the first in 7 times for me that we only had 3 people for the board. So this time, I mean, we welcome. I think everybody's sitting here just. It's not a problem on our side. If you need to change the team, if you don't need to change the team, if you need to vote on what board member. Just vote, and we're good, we're good. It's pre-board. So if you need to change the team, we're good. You have to, the 24th.
who are our observers now?
Our team makeup is, our school attorney, myself, Mrs. Beckley, Mrs. Grandison, Mrs. Miles, Mrs. Kahn, and Mr. Watkins.
Mr. Watkins is the observer, so we could add an observer. Is that, I mean, is that a
Yeah.
fair statement? We could add an
Yeah.
observer.
Our plans wasn't Donna's plans that you would bring somebody in. If there was a topic that you're covering.
Well, under the ground rules, if there's a particular topic, you can bring anybody in to discuss that particular topic.
Okay,
in
I
specific.
remember that little piece. I didn't.
But I didn't memorize all ground rules, but you can pull people in at times if need be
For expertise.
for expertise.
Yeah. I knew there was something.
So we could keep Lois on the IBB and put Michelle on as an observer then, is that true?
Technically, yes.
Mhm.
I mean, yes,
And again, for not, and again, I feel like I'm rehashing it, but again, the whole part of the point of the way we set this up is for her to learn, you know, because Lois has some cardinal knowledge and experience, and I think that whole process would be good for her to see how that works, you know, 'cause she's a Board of Education member, first and foremost, so. But that's what I think. We talked about it long enough, I feel like. So,
Do we have any other board issues?
Our planning that we got set up for April 13th, May 2nd, June 1st, and August 17th, do we have a final roster for that 5:30 to 8:30?
The strategic planning?
That's correct.
Okay,
yes.
we gathered up the names. We're sending out, I think Mr. Wrench is asking some CA members. We'll get our OC members. We're sending out letters to the people that are, we couldn't send out letters to everybody that everybody recommended. So we'll send the first batch out, we get the reply back in, and so we send out 25 replied, and we'll send out the next batch. So hopefully we'll have the team before, it's, I think the first one is what, April 3rd?
I don't remember the exact date,
I can't
but
remember
as
the
far as, yes,
Ryan, or Aaron just rattled them off.
yeah.
But it's 13th, isn't it?
How many-
13th, May 2nd.
Yeah.
first.
How many total community members? Did August 17th?
Community-
How many total commute, was it 40?
No, they were
No,
suggesting
13.
they were
There's total, the total
Oh, I thought it
group
was
is only 30.
30.
The total
That's with
group
us and community members.
Yes.
and CEA, and it's, the total group is, the board. Of course, obviously,
Community, and we were
Community.
asking for staff members to be
staff
part of that.
members, OC members, we're asking everybody for their input, and then there'll be, so you're looking at about 15 communities,
seats.
15 to 16 community
And I
members,
haven't talked to Ms. Khan, but I need to, but at least get a sophomore.
and one
junior
student.
To have
We'd
a
like to have
student
one
perspective. A couple students, but I know I put her on the spot, and now she's writing diligently, but we also wanted a
We
student
can
perspective.
expand it to a possibility of 35 to 40, because so you may lose some in the interim, by the end of the 4 sessions. But it's too much for that much material to be conveyed if you have that many people. So that's that. But the letters are going out. Matter of fact, I signed all of them previously. I think it was last week. I don't even know my time rights or all of that stuff.
And then during Mr. Wrench's presentation, during the legislative update resource officer. Kim,
Mhm.
financially, where are we at with the resource officer? Can we afford a resource officer? Safety is our most important thing here. Keep that in mind.
In addition to educating our students.
Exactly, yeah.
We get rid of the.
So, I mean.
So
I just
my goal on a year-to-year basis is to keep us in the black for that year, so there's going to be years that we have to dip into our reserves, or might be years that we have an overage. So if I'm truly looking at a year, I think my 5-year forecast shows us, was it this year? I think we're dipping into reserves. Next year, we might get a little bit, and then
We
it drops
dip.
off again.
We dip again.
Adding a resource officer, or however many you're thinking, would
Yeah,
definitely
that's-
increase our cost, which would dip into the reserves even more.
But there's a potential for grant money from the state.
Yeah, and from what it's an optional thing, and what I saw was that perhaps was it like 65,000 would be offered per building with a maximum set or something like that, so
Is that just for a 1-year time frame, or?
Yeah.
So 65,000 per building. One time.
One time. Is it one bill?
I don't, well, that might go
Well,
each year,
under-
the biannual budget, but after 2
under
years,
that-
who knows?
Right.
Under that proposed budget from Governor DeWine, that he is suggesting one resource officer per building.
Yeah.
So that's what he's suggesting, is that we look to outfit. So we're looking at 5 resource officers at whatever extra expense that becomes on our end.
And
If
he-
that's where we go. with
And Mr. Wrench and I have discussed it, because I'm like, what would that even look like? And he mentioned that, we would first go probably through the sheriffs, because we could not afford to hire them on as probably an employee of ours. It'd have to be a contracted out thing, perhaps with the sheriff department, because I mean, to pay them for the whole year, maybe they could do a better, that they, when they're not in school, they can use them as on the road or something like that, so. But we don't know there again, if that's being built for sure yet. It's just in the beginning stages of the budget.
And then what we got here? Coaches, volleyball coach. We got one applicant, is that correct?
We have one applicant and I have called that individual several times. And the other day, Mr. Jones had reached out via phone call and actually got in touch with text. And I do have in my office the text message screenshots for Mr. Jones. That person is not committing at this point because he has said he's had college offers and other high school offers, potentially he's mulling over. So we do not have a commitment from that person that had applied. We tried to bring him in for an interview. That didn't work out. And from there, I was playing phone tag and Mr. Jones was able to get in touch via text, and in those texts, he said, I'm not committing at this point in time.
Still looking for it.
Yeah, we're still looking for a volleyball coach.
On the coaches thing, I see the name that you're recommending your boys as head boys golf coach. Are you allowed, did you check with legal, are you allowed to recommend a immediate family member?
I can, because of nepotism, as far as if we've gone through a search to try to find someone, then you can make that recommendation onto that. Mr. Jones, last year, we had Mr. Ong coaching. He is doing a student teaching. He is not committing to coaching our golf team because what if I get a job, he said, and move away? And Mr. Jones has worked hard to try to find some people. I kind of reluctantly put them on, as far as, Justin he and I have talked, obviously, and saying, that's who we have at the moment.
Not that I have a problem with it,
Yeah.
but I'm just asking
Yeah.
if legally,
Yeah. Well, I know
are you allowed to?
you worry about board nepotism and hiring your friends and relatives. And if you have proof in that here, we've done our hiring and this is the best candidate, or done our interviewing process and doing our search with Mr. Jones has done that, then these are the candidates that we have for that.
And most importantly, we have kids that need coaches and I mean, we got to do what we need to do, bottom line.
When you say they're co-coaches, does that mean they're split the stipend?
Yes.
Hey, that last year, we didn't have to go through the last one,
Yeah, we were,
They started almost the season
Yeah.
without.
And how is that, like, when we're looking for, is it just on our website? Is he posting? I know I talked with Justin briefly and he was saying he did this and did that. I don't know. I mean, I'm not looking for a coaching position, but if I wanted to become a coach, where am I going to look at to get the information that, hey, there's an opening at Claymont?
right. The volleyball was put on for the Ohio Department of Education. Have had no hits there. He has put it out via his AD network thing. I'm not entirely sure that's something he handles, but there's a network there where they can post jobs. So, and then we have that one person that have any interest in that at all.
Keep on. Yeah.
Hurry up before I forget.
Wait.
Think of something else.
When you start thinking, is there any amendments or additions or corrections to the board agenda?
I don't have any amendments or anything unless there's a typing error somewhere along the line or something that was
Okay.
caught.
Items to be pulled separately? We're halfway through the treasurer's report.
Okay. Looking for a first and second to approve the financial report for February 2023. The payment of bills of February were presented. The board minutes from the February 13th board meeting. There was then a now statement with one item on it. And to accept the resolution accepting the amounts and rates that were provided by the county treasurer. And then I listed them for the general fund and permanent improvement funds there.
I make a motion to approve the treasurer's report and recommendations.
I'll second it. We have roll call.
Yep, Mrs. Host,
Yes.
Mrs. Grandison,
Yes.
Mr. Cottrell,
Yes.
Mr. Miles,
Yes.
and Mrs. Wolf.
Yes.
Thank you.
Superintendent's recommendation.
Yes, I guess he decided not to come and be in the limelight, but accept the resignation for retirement purposes for Rich Page, effective the 30th of June at the end of business day. As Mrs. Wolf said, he's been in education 41 years, 31 of them at Claymont. I will say this, that I don't know if I've ever found somebody who doesn't have a passion for kids more than Rich. He's always kept at a center. So I want to commend Rich and thank him for his service to Claymont. And I know he's looking forward to retirement and continuing his following his high school how do you say that? Country singer star, Donna Fargo. So,
What is it? Donna Fargo?
You said Dolly Parton.
so I know we'll catch him tomorrow. Also, item B, approve the 3-year administrative contract starting on 1st of August in 2023. And that'll run through 26 for the following individuals. Amy Kahn for high school principal, Brian Watkins as middle school principal. We have a resignation for Stephanie McQuaid as high school cook, terminating the employment of Mr. Mangus under a 90-day probationary period that goes back to February 24th. We had a memorandum of understanding for Mount Union for student teacher placement. And then the next item F, we have some student teacher placements for next year. Courtney Beckley is going to be with Ashley Blair and Doug Bezzosi, and Callie West will be with Bethany Doan. We have some overnight trips to approve. We have the competitive cheer team. They're going to Myrtle Beach, and there's no cost to the district for that. Excuse me. FFA has 3 trips overnight. We have April 15th, 16th, May 3rd, and through the 5th, and then also May 31st and June 1st. We have a coordination of care services with the Educational Service Center. So that was in your packet to review. We had an amendment to the middle school handbook. On page 10, we're going to add to include vitamin vapes. We can't keep on in front of this as much as possible. So we're adding this into that section. You had handbooks for the elementary, intermediate, and high school to approve. And then also we have the fall athletic supplementals for next year pending proper credentialing. Item L, approving Terry T.C. Cottrell as a volunteer football coach for next year, pending credentialing. Item M, Kelsey Barnhart as the non-athletic supplemental for National Honor Society advisor. And also we're having non-renewing our winter athletic supplementals. And then our policy committee met for item O, and we had some changes at the recommendation from the attorney who handles policy for the following policy that we have. And also we have a substitute secretary and Cassie Redmond.
Do I have a motion to accept the superintendent's recommendation?
So moved. Or did you approve it?
Yes.
Steve, okay, I'll second it.
Roll call.
Mr. Miles,
Yes.
Mrs. Host,
Yes.
Mr. Cottrell,
Yes.
Mrs. Grandison,
Yes.
and Mrs. Wolf.
Yes.
We won't be one.
I don't know if you go now.
We need to, do we need another executive session?
I asked for the executive session and I do not need the executive session now.
Okay.
So unless somebody else has a reason to go in.
We got one last, we did not do what the board policy said with evaluations.
Yeah, we're behind.
From the superintendent and treasurer.
Those were due March 1st. He's right.
New policies.
Yeah, he's right.
So we
We
need
do
to
need to
do
do
that.
those.
Or we gotta do as a policy committee is move the date. Because we're not following board policy.
But that really doesn't look good for you, does it?
So can we move that date to,
I thought they told us last year something about not moving the date
Just do it late.
because you're already in a contract. So I can't remember. I remember something about moving it. I think it's.
I would like,
It's in an email.
what I like, when we evaluate it or put in you guys' I would like, you go pull that out and go back, hey, did I,
right,
and get something on paper, or hey, I did this.
the evaluation of the superintendent treasurer done in executive session.
Right.
But it would
Correct.
require us, I don't think that it would require a thought process before then. So we want to do it for the next board
Next
meeting.
board meeting.
I wouldn't be prepared. I personally wouldn't be prepared to do an evaluation on anybody without
think
looking
what-
at the previous.
No.
What Aaron's saying is for them to pull out their evaluations and go through what we did last year and then them prepare for
For
that
us.
and then us.
Right.
Do an evaluation after that, you know what I mean? Because
Right.
there should be a discussion with
Correct.
them, hey, this is what we.
But do we want to put this on for next, to be executive session, next board meeting? Do we have to change the policy? We might need to move the date.
I think it's in an old email that we don't have to. We'll have to
Think about
look
this
back.
one already in the middle of
I think
the
it's already in a contract
It's already in the contract, that's right.
because they're already in a
In a
contract.
Right,
Okay.
so it's.
So I think we have until June 30th, technically. Okay.
Well, going forward, I mean, with this, I'd like for Kim and Brian to go down, for our goals that we set through the board for you guys. 6 months into it, hey, this is what I did, this is what I, to show which direction we're going, going forward. So 6 months.
If we're gonna plan to do that for next board meeting's executive session, then they'll be given that time frame, and then we can be given that time frame so we can be prepared next board meeting to proceed with that. Is that all right with everybody? Or you want to be the following? April has.
Can we get a copy of what we gave you last year?
Yeah, just
Thank
send
you.
that to me. Okay, thank you. Okay, so we will not be going into executive session. Okay,
So I make a motion, we adjourn.
sounds good. We have no new business, right?
And a second?
Good.
And everybody- I think you're. Who seconded it?
Aaron. 8:06.
I think it's been.
So is that a?